Welcome to the definitive Revenant strategy guide. You are watching Dom's Roundtable. My name is Dom, and with hundreds of hours logged in Nightreign already, along with full solo completion for every Night Lord, I wanted to share my knowledge with you and help you become the best player you can possibly be, so you can carry your team to victory using the Revenant every single time. Today we'll be covering everything from hidden features and mechanics of all of the Revenant's abilities, along with her weaknesses and mistakes to avoid, and general gameplay tips. So make sure you're subscribed for more of the best Nightreign content, and let's jump straight into her passive ability. Necromancy will raise enemy ghosts to fight as allies. Ghosts are summoned to fight, but are fleeting and dissipate after some time. So if you didn't know, the Revenant's passive ability is one of the strongest in the game, especially when fighting bosses who have adds, though it is lackluster in Night Lords because it literally just does not apply. However, how Necromancy works is whenever the Revenant deals the finishing blow to any enemy other than a major boss, as I say, it must be the finishing blow, she has a chance of reanimating that defeated foe as an allied phantom, which will follow her for a brief period of time and engage any further targets that she attacks. As I say, phantoms created like this will vanish in around a minute and are not subject to the effects of Immortal March, which we'll talk about later on. But several can exist at the same time, meaning when you are fighting bosses or just encounters with lots of enemies, if you get her big AoE attacks like fire or frost dragon breath and she can mow down waves of enemies, she has a higher and higher chance of bringing multiple enemies back to life to fight for her for the next minute, meaning she's really good at clearing waves of medium enemies. And all of the enemies that she raises as part of her Necromancy ability can exist alongside your three primary summons. So you can have one of your primary summons active, which we'll talk about in just a minute as part of the character skill, and then an endless amount of limited time ghosts as well. And again, just in case you didn't know, Necromancy can activate on basically every single enemy in the game apart from major bosses. Yes, this even applies to many minor bosses such as Pumpkin Heads, Banished Knights, and Demi-Human Chiefs, making it a universally useful diversionary tactic and situationally quite powerful as an additional source of damage, as I say, if you are fighting against lots and lots of enemies at once. Next up for her character skill, Summon Spirit, you will play your lyre to summon fallen family to rally in battle. Choose to summon Helen, the agile page, Frederick, the burly cook, or Sebastian, the doting butler. So the Revenant's character skill can be a bit of a minefield to get used to because there's lots of different buttons to press to make something happen. So let me start there. Firstly, if you're playing on a PlayStation controller, as you do with all character skills, you will hold triangle and press L2, or that's obviously Y and LT on an Xbox controller. That will bring up your Spirit Summon menu. Now you will press the corresponding trigger or bumper button to summon either Helen, Frederick, or Sebastian. And as you can see, they are summoned with R1, L1, and R2, or you will use L2 to put them back away again. And I'll talk about why you might want to do that in just a second. Now, please do note, deciding which spirit to summon only has a real impact when fighting more minor foes. Against big bosses, all three of them serve the purpose of doing a little bit of damage and serving as a temporary distraction. It's not like if you summon Helen against this boss, she's going to be significantly more powerful than Frederick. Against major bosses and Night Lords, none of them are particularly great, but they're not there to be your primary source of damage. They're there as a distraction, to soak up a few hits, to allow you to reposition, to allow you to charge up your really long casting spells. They're basically there as an extra shield in boss fights. So they will probably be dying quite frequently. They won't be doing too much in the way of damage, but that's fine. It doesn't mean they're underpowered. That is what their purpose is in boss fights. The Revenant is the big damage dealer in boss fights, and we'll talk about how to play her and how to make the most out of that later on in the video. But in regards to using your spirits for more minor enemies, Helen is really good at bursting down high health enemies who struggle to hit more nimble targets. Frederick is fantastic for dealing poise damage, so if you're fighting anything that can be a bit scary but can be staggered easily, Frederick is your go-to. And Sebastian is great at clearing out waves of minor enemies. Though honestly, don't feel like you have to min-max and use all your spirits for their absolutely specifically perfect scenarios. Switch between them all, give them all equal playtime, because when they are inactive, they are recovering their HP passively, and this way you can cycle out between them much more frequently. So don't worry about always using them in the absolute most perfect situation. Just chuck out whichever summon you think is the best at the time, let the others recover their HP, and it's all about just cycling them out every so often so that they're all recovering health, they're all doing damage, they're all helping you out, they are all equally as good as each other. So now let us talk about her ultimate art, Immortal March. This will do two things. It will release Vengeful Ire to make yourself and nearby allies immortal, and this does three things. It will release Vengeful Ire to make self and nearby allies immortal. It will revive near-death allies, and transform your 3 family summons into immortal warriors that will immediately trigger their own ultimate art. Please note that the trigger of the ultimate art for your active spirit summon is more of a secondary function of the Revenant's ultimate. The two primary uses are to use this near the end of a boss fight if your team are all out of healing flasks, to keep you alive on 1 HP while you try and burst the boss down, or ideally to use it to instantly revive your allies from near death, especially if they've already got a full 3 stacks of that purple bar built up, because otherwise, as you probably already know, it will take so long to get them up off the floor, and this ultimate art in specific will revive them instantly, no matter how many times they have been downed. That is the absolute most important use for Immortal March. Now, if you are curious how this affects your family summons as well, Helen will perform a Swift Rapier combo, Frederick will use a multi-hit spinning attack with his hammer, and Sebastian will fire the good old Ghost Flame Laser Beam. Now, there is a relic you can find for your Immortal Art that means you will do a big Ghost Flame explosion when you trigger it as well. This is absolutely incredible. It's got a big AoE, it does loads of damage, and it makes Immortal March just as offensive as it is defensive. So it's now really effective in all situations, and it completely transforms how you use the Revenant. So now you know the best uses for each of her skills, let's have a look at some of the do's and don'ts to get the most out of the Revenant and allow you to be the crutch that every team will inevitably eventually need. So the other Nightfarer that the Revenant can most be likened to is the Recluse. However, despite the fact that they are both primarily spellcasters, with their highest attributes being Faith and Arcane, they play surprisingly different, because though the Recluse's raw damage output is potentially higher, as she has both an S scaling in Intelligence and Faith, whereas the Revenant's is only an S in Faith and a B in Intelligence, the Revenant has a hell of a lot more survivability than the Recluse due to her family. The Revenant also has higher Arcane, meaning big powerful spells with really long cast times work a bit better on the Revenant than they do on the Recluse, especially if they focus around applying status effects. So as I said, the Dragon Frost Breath or the Rot Breath going to be absolutely fantastic on the Revenant, because she's going to build up the status effect damage quicker, and she's a bit more protected by her spirits. And even though the Revenant and the Recluse do both have an S scaling in Faith, I believe the Revenant's is just a smidge higher, meaning you want to go absolutely all in, completely ham on Faith spells. So again, as I say, something like Rotten Breath or even Elden Stars, if you can find that, going to absolutely melt things as the Revenant. Because most of her damage will come from very slow casting, very high FP cost spells, ideally you want to have a few Starlight Shards on her as well. So always be on the lookout for these and try and buy a few from merchants as you are exploring the map, because it's far cheaper to buy them here than it is at the Spirit Shelter right at the end of a match. And of course, if she does run out of FP, you always want at least one backup weapon. She's okay in melee. The rest of her offensive stats aren't too bad, but just remember she's incredibly squishy, so ideally you would have a bow capable of inflicting status ailments to make use of her relatively high arcane stat, and again to keep her away from the fight. And the final thing I would say as another potential suggestion, say you are near the end game and you've got all the weapons you want now, you've got a really good Dragon Communion seal in one hand, and you're able to cast these really high power spells quite frequently, the last thing you might want to consider is even equipping her with a Great Shield in her other hand, because as I say, she has painfully low HP, and this will just give her an extra line of defense should all of her spirits be wiped out, which, let's face it, they probably will be within the first 30 seconds of pretty much any Night Lord. And that's it, my friends. That is how to absolutely crush Nightreign as the Revenant. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you jump into the Discord server so we can all play some matches together. And as always, all that's left for me to say is thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.